I am. Years ago, Emile Coué electrified the world with his cures of all manner of diseases, solely through the power of suggestion. Nobody ought to be sick. He proclaimed and proceeded to prove it by curing hundreds who came to him after doctors had failed to relieve them. Not only that, but he showed that the same methods could be used to cure one's affairs to bring riches instead of debts, success instead of drudgery. Originally, Coué was a hypnotist. In his little drugstore, he found occasional patients whom he could hypnotize. He hypnotized them, put their conscious minds to sleep, and addressed himself directly to their subconscious. To the subconscious, he declared that there was nothing wrong with whatever organ the patient had thought diseased, and the subconscious accepted the statement and molded the creative force within accordingly. When the patient came out from under the hypnotic influence, he was well. It remained then only to convince his conscious mind of this, so he would not send through new suggestions of disease to his subconscious, and the patient was cured. How account for that? By the fact that the disease or imperfection is not so much in your body as in your mind. It is in your rate of motion, and this is entirely mind-controlled. Change the subconscious belief, and the physical manifestations change with it. You speed up your rate of motion, and in that way throw off the discordant elements of disease. Doctors recognize this when they give their patients harmless sugar pills, knowing that these will dispel fear and that when the images conjured up by fear are gone, the supposed trouble will go with them. But Coué found many patients whom he could not hypnotize. How to treat them? By inducing a sort of self-hypnosis in themselves. It is a well-known fact that constant repetition carries conviction, especially to the subconscious mind. So Coué had his patients continually repeat to themselves the affirmation that their trouble was passing, that they were getting better and better. Every day in every way I am getting better and better. And this unreasoning affirmation cured thousands of ills that had been troubling them for years. What is the back of that success? A law as old as the hills, a law that has been known to psychologists for years, the law that the subconscious mind accepts as true anything that is repeated to it convincingly and often. And once it has accepted such a statement as true, it proceeds to mold the creative force working through it in such wise as to make it true. You see, where the conscious mind reasons inductively, the subconscious uses only deductive reasoning. Where the reasoning mind weighs each fact that is presented to it, questions the truth or falsity of each, and then forms its conclusions accordingly, the subconscious acts quite differently. It accepts as fact any statement that is presented to it convincingly. Then, having accepted this as the basis of its actions, it proceeds logically to do all in its power to bring it into being. That is why the two most important words in the English language are the words, I am. That is why the ancients regarded these two words as the secret name of God. You ask a friend how he is, and he replies carelessly, I am sick, I am poor, I am unlucky, I am subject to this, that or the other thing, never stopping to think that by those very words he is fastening misfortune upon himself, declaring to the subconscious mind within him that he is sick or poor or weak or the servant of some desire. Let the weak say I am strong. The prophet Joel exhorted his people thousands of years ago. And the advice is as good today as it was then. You have seen men, under hypnotic suggestion, perform prodigies of strength. You have seen them with their bodies stretched between two chairs, their heads on one, their feet on another, supporting the weight of several people standing on them, when they could not ordinarily hold up even their own bodies in that position. How can they do it? Because the hypnotist has assured their subconscious that they can do it, that they have the strength and power necessary. Therefore I say unto you, what things soever ye desire when ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them. That was the assurance given us by the master psychologist of all time, the great healer, the worker of miracles. Again and again, he told those he healed that it was their faith that made them whole. And where such faith was lacking, as when he went back to Nazareth, the home of his childhood, it is written that there he did mighty works. How can you work up the necessary faith to accomplish the things you desire? By taking the advice of the wise men of old, of the prophet Joel, of Jesus, by claiming it as yours, and setting your subconscious mind to work making those claims come true. It is a sort of self-hypnosis, but so is all of a prayer. Away back in 1915, the head of the Warsaw Psychological Institute conducted a series of experiments from which he concluded that the energy manifested by anyone during life is in a direct ratio with his power for plunging himself into a condition of auto-hypnosis. In simple language, that means convincing yourself of the possibility of doing the things you want to do. The subconscious in each of us has the knowledge, has the power to do any right thing we may require of it. The only need is to implant in it the confidence to believe that you receive which Jesus taught. In a case cited by Bauduin, the famous psychologist, a woman after using autosuggestion as a means of helping herself, declared, "I can do twice as much work as before. During vacation, I have been able to go through 2 extensive tasks, such as a year ago I should never have attempted. This year I systematized my work and said, I can do it all. What I am undertaking is materially possible, and therefore must be morally possible. Consequently, I ought not to experience, and shall not experience, discouragement, hesitancy, annoyance, or slackness as a result of these affirmations." The way to her inner powers was opened, and she was able to say truly, "Nothing could stop me. Nothing could prevent my doing what I had planned to do." You might almost have said that things were done by themselves, without the slightest effort on my part. Not only did she find herself working with a high degree of success heretofore unknown, but with certainty and calmness of mind beyond her previous attainment. Emerson, with his genius for condensing great truths into a few words, wrote, "Do the thing and you shall have the power." The wise men of old learned thousands of years ago that life is like an echo. It always returns the call sent out. Like the echo, the response is always the same as the call, and the louder the call, the greater the response. You say I am sick, I am poor, and your words are forerunners of your circumstance. Every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give an account of in the day of judgment. And that day of judgment comes sooner than most people think. Be careful to speak only those words which you are willing to see take form in your life, for remember the words of wise old Job, "Thou shalt also decree a thing, and it shall be established unto thee." Never speak the word of lack or limitation, for by thy words shalt thou be justified, and by thy words shalt thou be condemned. Affirm constantly, I have faith in the power of my word. I speak only that which I desire to see made manifest. Remember, behind you is infinite power, before you is endless possibility, around you is endless opportunity. Why should you fear? C.G. Tanner expresses the idea beautifully. If you have faith in what you want to do, if you behold yourself as a king's own son, then you have asked God's power to work through you and pledged yourself to see that it is done. With faith, I place it in God's hands, you say? God's hands are yours. Your good must come through you. God has no other hands with which he may give unto you your sonship's rightful due. Faith and persistence travel hand in hand, the one without the other is incomplete. If you would reach success, then take the stand. This I will try once more, and no defeat can cloud that beacon gleaming bright and clear, or conjure up dread failure's haunting wraith. You rest secure with God. No thought of fear can dim the shining armor of your faith. Most people seem to think that we work to live, but there is a deeper purpose in life than that. What we really work for is to call forth the talents that are within our own souls, to give expression to the creative force working through us. That is the one big purpose for which we were born, to express the creative force in us, to give God the chance to express himself through us. And we can do it. As the famous English poet Shelley put it, the Almighty has given men arms long enough to reach the stars, if they would but put them forth. And the first step lies in using what you have. The key to power lies in using, not hoarding. Use releases still more power for ever greater works. Hoarding builds a hard shell around the thing hoarded and prevents more from coming in. You may have what you want if you are willing to use what you have now. You can do what you want to do if you are willing to do what there is to do right now. The one condition coupled with the gift of truth, says Emerson, is its use. Professor William Bateson of the British Society for Scientific Research said, "We are finding now beyond doubt that the gifts and geniuses of mankind are due not so much to something added to the ordinary person, but instead are due to factors which in the normal person inhibit the development of these gifts. They are now without a doubt to be looked upon as releases of powers normally suppressed. And why are they suppressed? Because of doubt, of fear of failure, of procrastination, of putting things off till the morrow. Straight from a mighty bow this truth is driven, they fail, and they alone, who have not striven. Tomorrow you will live, you always cry, in what far country does this morrow lie, that 'tis so mighty long ere it arrive? Beyond the Indies does this morrow live? 'Tis so far-fetched, this morrow, that I fear 'twill be both very old and very dear. Tomorrow I will live, the fool does say, today itself's too late, the wise lived yesterday. Abraham Cowley. To begin, said Ausonius, is to be half done. Greatly begin I, wrote another sage. Though thou have time for but a line, be that sublime. And the Easterners have a proverb that the road of 1,000 miles begins with one step. So make your start, and don't allow any thought of failure to stop you. Have faith, if not in yourself, then in the creative force working through you. Many splendid works have been lost to mankind because the faith of its originator was not strong enough to release the creative force that would have enabled him to make his dream come true. Remember that you cannot talk about failure, think about failure, and reap success. You'll never reach the top of the ladder if doubt and fear and procrastination make you hesitate to put your foot on the first rung. There is a power working through you that can accomplish any aim you may aspire to. But to energize that power, you must harness it up with faith. You must have the will to believe, the courage to aspire, and the profound conviction that success is possible for anyone who works for it persistently and believingly. 340 years ago, there sailed from Spain the mightiest fleet the world had ever known: Spanish galleasses, Portuguese carracks, Florentine caravels, huge hulks from other countries, floating fortresses, mounting tier upon tier of mighty cannon, 140 great ships in all, manned to the full with sailors and soldiers and gentlemen adventurers. The treasure of the Incas, the plunder of the Aztec, had gone into the building and outfitting of this vast armada. No wonder Spain looked upon it as invincible. No wonder England feared it. For this was the armada that was to invade England and carry fire and sword through town and countryside. This was the armada that was to punish these impudent Britons for the piratical raids of Sir Francis Drake, Morgan, and all those hardy seamen who had dared death and slavery to pull down treasure ships on the Spanish main. The iron hand of Philip II of Spain rested heavily upon the Netherlands. It dominated all of Europe. Now he confidently looked forward to the time when England, too, would groan beneath its weight. But he reckoned without one thing: faith. He put in charge of this invincible armada the Duke of Medina Sidonia, a man who had no faith in himself, no faith in his ability, no faith in his men. And when he did that, he blunted the point of every pike, he dulled the cutting edge of every sword, he took the mightiest naval weapon ever forged, and deliberately drew its sting. Is that putting it too strongly? Just listen. Here is the letter the Duke wrote to the king, upon being notified of his appointment to the command: "My health is bad, and from my small experience of the water I know that I am always seasick. The expedition is on such a scale and the object is of such high importance that the person at the head of it ought to understand navigation and sea fighting, and I know nothing of either. The Adelantado of Castile would do better than I. The Lord would help him, he is a good Christian and has fought in naval battles. If you send me, depend upon it, I shall have a bad account to render of my trust." He had everything to succeed with everything but faith in himself. He expected failure, and disastrous failure met him at every turn. 140 mighty ships, the greatest ever built. And England, to meet that splendid armada, had only 30 small ships of war and a few merchantmen outfitted and manned by private gentlemen. Yet England, while alarmed, was yet courageous and hopeful. For had not England Sir Francis Drake? And Lord Charles Howard? And a dozen other mighty fighters who had met and bested the Spaniards a score of times on the Spanish main? And could they not do the same again? So said England, believing in her leaders. And her leaders echoed that sentiment. Are not English sailors the hardiest seamen and finest fighters afloat? They asked. And believed in their men. The English had 30 or 40 little ships against the Spaniards' 140 mighty men of war. The English had scarce 2 days' powder aboard, so penurious was their queen, while the Spanish were outfitted with everything a ship of war could ask. But Howard and Drake were not depending upon any queen to fight their battles. They were not worried about the size of the enemy. They were thinking, there are the Spaniards. Here are we. We have fought them and whipped them a dozen times before. We can do it now. So let's get at them. They went out expecting victory. And victory met them at every turn. From the Lizard in Cornwall to Portland, where Don Pedro de Valdez and his mighty ships were left, from Portland to Calais, where Spain lost Hugo de Moncada with the galleys which he captured, from Calais, out of sight of England, around Scotland and Ireland, beaten and shuffled together, that mighty armada was chased, until finally, the broken remnants drifted back to Spain. With all their vast squadron, they had not taken one ship or bark or pinnace of England. With all those thousands of soldiers, they had not landed one man but those killed or taken prisoner. 3/4 of their number were lost or captured, their mighty fleet destroyed. And why? Because one man lacked faith. Spanish soldiers were proving on a dozen fields that no braver fighters lived anywhere. The Spanish square had withstood infantry, cavalry, artillery, then carried all before it. Yet these same soldiers, afloat in their huge fortresses, were utterly defeated by less than a fourth of their number. And the reason? Because they were a spear without a head, an army without a leader, riches and power without faith. Was ever a better example of the power of belief? Men go all through life like the Duke of Medina Sidonia, looking ever for the dark side of things, expecting trouble at every turn and usually finding it. It is really lack of courage to try for great things, courage to dare disappointment and ridicule to accomplish a worthy end. Have you ever sat on a train and watched another train passing you? You can look right on through its windows to the green fields and pleasant vistas beyond. Or you can gaze at the partitions between the windows and see nothing but their dingy drabness. So it is with everything in life. You can look for the good, the joyful, and happy and not merely see only these but manifest them in your daily life. Or you can look for trouble, for sickness and sorrow and find them awaiting you around every corner. Pessimists call this the Pollyanna age and ridicule such ideas as this. But ridicule or not, it works in one's personal life as well as in business, and thousands can testify to its efficacy. Perhaps one of the best examples of the difference that outlook makes is in the lives of Emerson and Thoreau. Emerson's philosophy of living can best be expressed in his own words: nerve us with incessant affirmatives. Don't bark against the bad, but chant the beauties of the good. And his tranquil and serene life reflected that attitude throughout. Thoreau, on the other hand, was constantly searching out and denouncing evil. With motives every whit as high as Emerson's, he believed in attacking the problem from the opposite angle, with the result that he was constantly in hot water, yet accomplished not a tenth of the good that Emerson did. Like the man in D'Annunzio's play, La Città Morta, fascinated by the tombs, he forgot the beauty of the sky. It is necessary at times to clean up evil conditions in order to start afresh. It is necessary to hunt out the source of pollution in order to purify a stream. But it should be merely a means to an end. And the end should always be not negative like the mere destruction of evil, but the positive replacement of evil with good. If you have ever walked across a high trestle, you know that it doesn't pay to look down. That way dizziness and destruction lie. You have to look forward, picking out the ties you are going to step on 10 or 20 feet ahead if you are to progress. Life is just such a trestle. And looking downward too much is likely to make one lose his balance, stumble and fall. You must gaze ever forward if you are to keep your perspective. There's a little poem by Edgar Guest too that exemplifies the idea. Somebody said that it couldn't be done, but he with a chuckle replied that maybe it couldn't, but he would be one who wouldn't say so till he tried. So he buckled right in with the trace of a grin on his face. If he worried, he hid it. He started to sing as he tackled the thing that couldn't be done, and he did it. Most of the world's progress has been made by just such men as that. Men like Watt, who didn't know that steam could not be made to accomplish any useful purpose and so invented the steam engine. Men like Fulton, who didn't know that it was foolish to try to propel a boat with wheels and so invented the steamboat. Men like Bell, Edison, Wright, who didn't know how foolish it was to attempt the impossible and so went ahead and did it. For God's sake, give me the young man who has brains enough to make a fool of himself, cried Stevenson. And when they succeed, the whole world echoes that cry. There is no limit upon you, except the limit you put upon yourself. You are like the birds, your thoughts can fly across all barriers, unless you tie them down or cage them or clip their wings by the limitations you put upon them. There is nothing that can defeat you, except yourself. You are one with the Father. And the Father knows everything you will ever need to know on any subject. Why then try to repress any right desire, any high ambition? Why not put behind it every ounce of energy, every bit of enthusiasm, of which you are capable? Muhammad established a larger empire than that of Rome on nothing but enthusiasm. And Muhammad was but a poor camel driver. What then can you not do? Men repress their power for good, and their capacity for success, by accepting suggestions of inferiority, by their timidity or self-consciousness, by fear, by conservatism. Never mind what others think of you. It is what you think that counts. Never let another's poor opinion of you influence your decisions. Rather, resolve to show him how unfounded is his opinion. People thought so poorly of Oliver Cromwell that he could not win permission to emigrate to the colonies. When he raised his regiment of cavalry, that later won the name of Ironsides because of its practical invincibility, the old soldiers and the dandies of the day laughed at it. Seldom had a lot of more awkward-looking countrymen been gathered together. Any soldier might have trained them. But the thing that made them invincible, the thing that enabled them to ride over and through all the legions of King Charles, was not their training, but their fervent belief in the justice of their cause, in their leader, and in their God. Hymn-singing hypocrites, their enemies called them. But there were no hypocrites. Here were men who were animated by a common faith that God was with them as with the Israelites of old, and that with God on their side, nothing could withstand them. That was the faith of Cromwell. And he instilled that faith into every man in his regiment. And while Cromwell lived to keep that faith alive, nothing did withstand them. They made the man who was not good enough to emigrate to America, ruler of England. Nothing worthwhile ever has been accomplished without faith. Nothing worthwhile ever will. Why do so many great organizations go to pieces after their founder's death? Why do they fail to outlive him by more than a few years? Because the ones who take up his work lack the forward look, the faith, to carry on. His idea was one of the service, theirs is to continue paying dividends. His thought was to build ever greater and greater, theirs to hold what he won. The best defensive is a strong offensive. You can't just hold your own. You can't stand still. You've got to go forward, or backward. Which is it with you? If forward, then avoid the pessimist as you would the plague. Enthusiasm and optimism may make mistakes, but it will learn from them and progress. Pessimism, conservatism, and caution will die of dry rot if it is not sooner lost in the forward march of things. So be an optimist. Cultivate the forward look. The optimist and pessimist, the difference is droll. The optimist sees the donut, the pessimist the whole. The good is always there if you look for it hard enough. But you must look for it. You can't be content to take merely what happens to come into your line of vision. You have got to refuse to accept anything short of good. Disclaim it, I say it is not yours. Say it and believe it. Then keep seeking, and the first thing you know, the good you have been seeking will be found to have been right under your nose all the time. What is the backbone of all business? Credit. And what is credit but faith? Faith in your fellow man, faith in his integrity, faith in his willingness and his ability to give you a square deal. What do you base credit faith upon? Upon hearsay, upon what your prospective customer has done for others, his promptness in paying them, his willingness to cooperate with them. In many cases you have never seen him, you can't be certain of your own personal knowledge that such a person exists, but you believe in him, you have faith. And having faith, your business grows and prospers. If you can have such faith in a man you have never seen, as to trust large portions of your earthly goods in his hands, can you not put a little trust in the Father, too? True, you have not seen him, but you have far greater proof of his being than of that of your customer thousands of miles away. You have far greater proof of his reliability, of his regard for you, of his ability, and his willingness at all times to come to your assistance in any right way you may ask. You don't need money with him. You don't need high standing in your community. You don't need credit. What is it makes a successful salesman? Faith in his house. Faith in the goods he is selling. Faith in the service they will render their customers. Faith in himself. Have you faith in your house and your Father in the manifold gifts he offers you so freely? Men can sell for a little while solely on faith in their own ability. They can palm off anything that will show a profit to themselves. But they never make successful salesmen. The inevitable reaction comes. They grow cynical, lose all faith in others, and eventually, lose faith in themselves as well. The successful salesman must have a fourfold faith: faith in his house, faith in his product, faith in the good it will do his customer, and faith in himself. Given such faith, he can sell anything. Given such faith in the Father, you can do anything. It wasn't superior courage or superior fighting ability that enabled Washington's half-trained army to beat the British. English soldiers were showing all over the world that they were second to none in fighting qualities. And the American soldiers were, for the most part, from the same sturdy stock. It was their faith in a greater power outside themselves. What is it differentiates the banker from the pawnbroker? Both make loans. Both require security. But where the pawnbroker must have tangible, material property that he can resell before he will lend a cent, the really great banker bases his loans on something bigger than any security that may be offered him: his faith in the borrower. America was built on faith. Those great railroad builders who spanned the continent knew when they did it that there was not enough business immediately available to make their investment profitable for a long time to come. But they had faith, a faith that was the making of our country. That same faith is evident on every hand today. Men erect vast factories in the faith that the public will find a need for it and buy their products. They build offices, apartments, and homes in the faith that their cities will grow up to the need of theirs. They put up public utilities capable of serving twice the number of people in their territories in the faith that the demand will not only grow with the population, but the availability of the supply will help to create new demands. Faith builds cities and businesses and men. In fact, everything of good, everything constructive in this old world of ours is based on faith. So if you have it not, grow it as the most important thing you can do. And if you have it, tend it, water it, cultivate it, for it is the most important thing in life. When nothing seems to help, I go and look at a stonecutter hammering away at his rock, perhaps 100 times without as much as a crack showing in it. Yet at the 101st blow, it will split in two, and I know it was not that blow that did it, but all that had gone before. J. A. Rees.